first of all, thank you guys for having me on tonight. I was very excited when Jordan Takieddin invited me to join you guys and told me a little bit about GENup and asked me to get in contact with Michelle if I was interested in doing this. And I was pleased to learn that there was a youth organization that was interested in actually being active and involved. So kudos to all of you guys for jumping in there. I couldn't be prouder, and I'm glad to be taking part in this tonight. So a little bit about myself. I am a California native. I was born and raised in Southern California in a tiny town called Barstow. And I tell people that I was born and raised and escaped and went to UCLA and lived there for quite a few years before moving up here to the Bay Area in 1999. I got my degree from UCLA in sociology. I was also pre-med, and after being tired of taking some science classes, is somebody saying something? I just heard feedback. Okay. After being tired of taking some science classes and wanting to branch out, that's how I decided to do sociology. And that gave me just a keen understanding of working not only with other people, but listening for social cues and looking at their body language and their eye contact, et cetera, just to figure out whether or not I'm jiving with them, whether or not they're telling the truth, et cetera. So it helps me read the room, which is helpful in my job, which is a client relations director for a financial services company. I won't say which one, but it's here in the Bay Area nationwide. And it helps me so that I can interact with my clients. I'm the liaison between the clients and the portfolio managers that are investing their money. And I'm listening for them to let me know what solutions they're interested in so that I can help solve those solutions. For example, if they want a certain type of product or one to switch out of, I listen for those cues. And I think that I can bring that to our local city council, and that I listen to the community. In fact, a lot of my pillars that I have, which are community, inclusivity, and transparency, were based off of what I was hearing from the community of Clayton and what was lacking. And so what I'm focusing on are traffic management and safety issues, racism, police community relations, as well as high density housing. So I'll stop there unless you want me to dive in a little bit more into each of those areas with questions that people have. Oh, I will tell you why I wanted to run for city council besides that. I don't know if any of you guys were at the June 5th rally that we had in Clayton, but we had 2 Black Lives Matter protests in June. The first one was on June 2nd, and if any of you guys were there, you know how that ended after there was a curfew that was instituted, and it ended in tear gas. And there were several residents who expressed their dismay with that, myself included. And I actually reached out to the mayor as well as some other members of the Clayton Business and Community Association, which I'm the secretary of that board, and just shared that we really needed to change the narrative because there were several residents that kept expressing on Nextdoor that they're coming, or they're going to come back, and they and them and those people. And I didn't like the type of language that was being used, and really wanted to share with them that had the police not stopped them where they actually stopped them on the night of the 2nd and let them peacefully protest in the Grove Park, which is our downtown location, park in our downtown location, that I think that the June 2nd rally would have been a lot smoother. So in working with some city council members, in fact, I contacted the mayor and just let her know, you know what, my family and I want to be a part of that. I wasn't a part of the June 2nd rally after I heard that there was going to be outside law enforcement that was in town, mainly because they're not familiar with my family. I didn't feel safe putting ourselves in that situation, so we stayed home on the 2nd. But I was intent on helping change the narrative to let people know people can congregate downtown without there being any danger. And I wanted to help lead that. So that's what my family and I did on the night of June 5th. And if anybody was there, you know how beautiful that night was, where a lot of our Black residents, my family included, got up and spoke and shared just how we have felt. I've been a resident of Clayton now for 17 years with my husband, Matt. We moved to, bought a house in 2003 there. And what we really learned that night was there are a lot of Black residents that don't like to venture around town. In fact, until that moment, I was telling everybody, and so is my husband, as we were having a lot of diversity and inclusion talks through our jobs, that we were the only full Black family in town. I had completely forgotten about another family friend, but most of the families were mixed. And so when everybody stood up on the gazebo that day in the park, I looked at all of them and said, where have you all been for the last 16 years? Because I hadn't seen any of them. And most of them remarked that they had been hiding in their homes. They go to work, maybe go to the grocery store, but they didn't really feel safe congregating in downtown. They didn't feel like they were welcome. And so that's where my inclusivity comes in. I wanted them to feel more a part of the community. And I think that we can do a better job of making people feel welcome. And I think part of that has to get with getting to know your neighbors. And so having transparent dialogue, talking about the hard conversations, which racism falls under, police community relations fall under, I think that's where we have to begin, so that people can get to realize that you don't have to be afraid of people who might have a different religion, a different color, look differently from you. We're all human beings, and we all deserve to coexist together. So there, I'll stop and let you ask questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tillman. That was a very powerful message, and thank you so much for having those sentiments. We all, God knows, we need that right now at this moment. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on to questions from the public. I polled my team on a couple questions to ask you, but we have a lot of people here who aren't from GENup, and you are totally welcome to ask a question. So if you want to ask a question, please use the raise hand function on the participants. I believe it should be on the participants bar, and I will ask you to unmute. So now we're going to move on to a question from Hadil.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Hadil. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your story already. So my question is about what you want, what kind of work you see yourself doing with the youth in your community, along with the youth, but also to get youth more involved.
Okay, thank you for that question. So after the June 5th rally, a group of us decided to form what we now call Clayton Speaks. I'm not sure if anybody or all of you guys are familiar with it, but there are about 12 or 13 of us. Some of us are just residents, some of us are city council members, but people who are interested in moving forth the dialogue that I just mentioned as far as racism and race relations issues in our town. And so when we first formed, we decided that we wanted to probably have 4 webinars. The first one was just an extension of our time down there at the downtown park, telling about our experiences. And then we brought in the educators and administrators from not all of them, but some of the local schools, the elementary school, the Diablo View Middle School, Clayton Valley Charter, as well as Northgate High School, and a teacher that was a local Clayton resident, but she teaches down at San Ramon. And once we started that conversation, we also decided to involve the youth, which was our third and most powerful webinar, in my opinion. And a lot of the youth shared that they really wanted to not only just talk about what the issues that they've experienced coming up throughout the local schools and living in Clayton, but also they really asked us adults to help them, to give them a voice and an avenue so that they can continue to make sure that people are aware of what's occurring in our town. And after we finished that third webinar, the group of us that formed Clayton Speaks talked to figure out where we wanted to go next. We do know that we want to have a police community relations one, and that's kind of on the horizon in a few weeks, or a few months rather. But we know that we want to have a place where the youth can actually have a place to come to. And so when I was just brainstorming and saying, how does that look? I would envision people being downtown, hanging out in Clayton, and then just saying, I got to go, I have a Clayton Speaks meeting. And that could be that they're going to go to an LGBTQ meeting that somebody's leading. They could be going to one that happens to deal with somebody teaching about anti-Semitism. It could be about race relations growing up as a person of color in the town. It could be about equity in education. It could be lots of different avenues. And it wouldn't just be the same Clayton Speaks people leading those. I think a lot of those can be led by youth, but it would give the youth an outlet, some place where they can go to have these types of discussions, and adults too. It would be open to the community. But I think that that's what's missing, is a place where everybody can kind of congregate. These wouldn't just be one-off meetings or one and done. It would be like a continuing thing that we'd continue for the future. So I think by you guys having GENup and starting this within the 2 schools, or at least the Mount Diablo Acalanas, I think you said it was Mount Diablo Acalanas, but last week I think you said that it was Northgate and Las Lomas schools that were participating. I think that it needs to be probably more broad as far as what Clayton Speaks does, so that other students from other cities can know that they can participate. It doesn't just have to be local Claytonites. And I think giving them that voice and letting them know that their voices are important, because they are, helps. And starting with the youngsters. I think it has to start in elementary school and on up. So thank you.
Oh, no. Thanks so much for that question. Hadil, okay, Alexis, can you try one more time? Can you unmute yourself? Okay. Alrighty. Okay, moving on to our next question. Thanks so much for that thoughtful answer, Ms. Tillman. Our next question is going to come from Emily Titterton.
Okay. I don't think she can unmute herself, is what she's trying to say.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here, first of all. Second of all, my question is, what steps do you support to make Clayton an actively anti-racist city? Are there specific policies that you would like to put in place regarding police or housing, etc., to make a more inclusive community?
Okay. Thank you for that question. I will say that the current City Council has done a great job so far since the June 5th rally of promoting that exact thing. So there is an anti-racism resolution that was put forth, and all 5 of them did sign that, which was great. I know that they're also discussing, they just discussed it at the last City Council meeting, adding inclusion to the Do the Right Thing, which is really what all of the Clayton schools, including Clayton Valley Charter High School and the police department, have all kind of signed on to that motto. And that began when my girls were in elementary school, and they're now both at Northgate. So it's been years in the making, and I think that I applaud them for doing that. So they're taking the steps to do it. I think that we still need to continue the conversation. And so what I found is that the more that we keep saying, and they're not my words, but people who grew up in the area will say, well, yeah, I grew up there, and Clayton is a racist town. What they mean is that they've experienced racism in the town, and their perception of it is, yeah, it's got some racist tendency. It doesn't mean everybody in the town is, but I think that the more that we can have that dialogue, it makes people uncomfortable. And I shared the other night at the City Council meeting, I'm okay having uncomfortable conversations and making people feel that discomfort. I think that's where we have to start. We have to let people know, yes, this is an issue. We need to address it. We're going to keep talking about it, and not just talk about it. We actually have to take action. And I know that that's going to be difficult, because change is always hard for people. Realizing that you can't change people's hearts. I mean, if somebody is racist and that's just really how they're going to live and die, then there's nothing you can do about that. But I think that we really have, at this moment, the genie's out of the bottle and you can't put it back. I think we keep speaking up and we keep pointing it out, and we let people know it's not welcome anymore. So.
Thank you so much for that answer, Ms. Tillman, and thank you so much for that question, Emily. And then the next one is going to come from a Clayton local, Olivia Yoshi.
Hi, Olivia. I don't think she can unmute herself either. You did a really good job of stopping the mute.
Sorry, yeah.
Or the unmute.
Hi.
Hi.
As a Clayton resident, I am very familiar with the kind of environment that Clayton has right now, where it's very hostile towards BIPOC people. And I've experienced it myself, especially in the school system. So I was wondering how this Clayton City Council can work with the school systems to be better regarding anti-racist movements.
Did you say to be better? Was that what you said? You broke up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you saw the second webinar with the educators, but we did have an elementary school teacher that joined us for that series, and they are already taking steps in the district. It's not very widely known, but there are teachers who are meeting together district-wide to discuss this very issue, and that's changing the curriculum. I think most of you guys would agree that the curriculum that all of us grew up with, myself included, and I won't say exactly my age, but I'm in my 40s, experience, it's whitewashed. And so we're not really learning about our real history. And it's not just a black or white history, it's all of our history. We're not learning any of that. And so I think that it really does start with the education system. And so I recently formally met Sharice Khan, who's on the school board rather. And I think that it's great to be able to have people that you can connect with on a more personal level, as well as sharing that all of us want to move our curriculum forward. So knowing that they're trying to implement that throughout all the schools in the district is great. I think that's a first start, but I do think that it can't just be individual teachers. I do think that they need to also pull in the administrators, because if you don't have it coming from the top down and the support from them, nothing is going to change. I also think that there needs to be bias training for a lot of them, because realistically, we all have our own biases, right? So once we can realize what those are and address those, I think that helps. It's great to have diverse ideas, but I think we also need to realize that everybody brings their own lens to all of this. And if you have a teacher who is opposed to changing the curriculum, for example, then what happens with that class of students? I'm just thinking of the elementary school. You've got 30 students who then don't get to benefit from learning about all of our history. I think it really does need to be top-down driven, even though I'm more bottom-up. But I do feel like it has to come from the leadership. It has to come from the top. They need to know that they have buy-in from them and that they're going to be held accountable for that, so that everybody is teaching the same thing for the benefit of the kids. I think that's how it could be beneficial. So sitting as a city council member, how I could help, I think how all of us could is, as I said, is just contacting and staying in contact with the school board and seeing what changes they're making and giving them ideas. I don't think that we can force them to do it, but I think the more that they know they have support from the local city councils, that will probably go a long way.
Great. Thank you so much for that answer, Ms. Tillman, and thank you so much for that question, Olivia. Our next question is going to come from Trey Scheid. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Trey.
Hi, Trey.
I actually have two questions, so you just said that you're more of a bottom-up type of person. What exactly did you mean by that?
Oh, sorry. So by bottom up, I mean, I like for things to start organically instead of being forced down on people. For example, when we started Clayton Speaks, that really was an organic event that happened. It started off with me making a phone call to the mayor and then grabbing other group of friends of ours that were interested in the same thing. And then it just skyrocketed from there. And so that's what I mean, starting organically from the bottom. And that's great that we have teachers who are interested in doing that, but the teachers can't do it by themselves for something this large, which is trying to change the school curriculum. So that's what I meant. I
see, totally. And then my next question, so like you said, you've been a client relations director for a major financial institution for a long time. And you said that this background, along with your involvement in the community.
Oh, I lost him.
Sorry. So you said, this work experience, along with your community involvement, would help you to listen to and fulfill the constituent needs. Can you elaborate on how this background will help you exactly?
Oh, sure. So I kind of alluded to that in my intro. And being a client relations director, I have to listen for cues from clients, or just explicitly, they could say what they're looking for. And I'm a good listener, but I would do the same thing, and I have done the same thing in our community. So for example, when someone tells me that there are issues of them not feeling welcome in town, which is what we heard the night of June 5th. I'm not on city council, but being a Clayton resident, I heard that, and that bothered me. It bothered me that I have neighbors who are afraid to come out of their homes because they don't feel welcome downtown. And so I'm willing to stick my neck out, as I am, to speak up for them, to make a change. And so that's what I mean. It's not just that my job did it. I actually think it comes from my background in sociology and listening to what the social cues, everything that people either say or don't say, I'm just in tune to, and I really do try to have a keen ear and listen for that so that I can actually stand up and help. And I've been doing that probably since I was 6, is the first recollection I have. And that was when my next door neighbor saw me reading a book outside, and he wanted to know what I was doing. And I was like, I'm reading a book. And then he says, well, can you read it to me? And I said, sure. And so I read him a few pages, and then I said, well, here, you read it. And he didn't want to take the book. And I didn't understand why he didn't want to take the book. And I kept trying to give it to him. And the more I kept trying to give him the book, the more he really just kept putting his head down and trying to move away from me. And I finally realized at 6 years old, he didn't know how to read. And so I said, can you read? And he shook his head no. And so I got up, I ran inside, and I got my little primer readers, which are back then were called Dick and Jane books. And I taught Douglas how to read from those. And so from a young age, I've always wanted to help people. Sometimes it could be a great thing. Sometimes it could be a fault because I sometimes don't know when to stop trying to help. But that's just me. If I see something wrong, I speak up and I try to help people. And so I do it in my job, and I do it throughout my personal life. So that's what I meant. Thanks for the thumbs up.
I bet he would say thank you if he couldn't mute himself, but yeah. Okay. Oh, so moving on. Thank you so much for that question, Trey. I sent them all, I told you, but I sent them all your like bio and your website, so they got to read a bit about you. So
okay.
Informed questions.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so our next question is going to come from Alexis. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is, how would you respond to COVID-19 affecting small businesses?
How would I respond to it, just me being me, or if I were on city council?
As a city council member.
I see. Okay, so as a city council member, I would say that, one, we have to abide by what the laws are, right? So we have to abide by what the governor says. And I think that they've done a pretty good job of allowing them to have dining outside. What I would do, which is what I do now in my personal life, is help promote those businesses. So I'm down where my family's been down there since we've been there, been here for many years. We like to patronize both of the businesses, or all of the businesses rather. We've done it throughout the years. Some we still do, some others we haven't, but I would like to promote those. So we've sat outside, we get to talk to people, we encourage people to go downtown to eat at the restaurants. But besides that, I think that, and this is going to tie in with the housing, there's a Olivia project that I know Olivia, it's actually your name, would know about, and that's a high density housing project that's downtown. There's a lot of angst and venom around that project. And so without getting into all the particulars, I will say that for the one benefit that I could see from having that downtown is the additional business that the local restaurants would get from that. Alexis, I'm not sure if you're familiar with our downtown, but a lot of our businesses are restaurants. We do have some insurance businesses, we have real estate, etc. But the bulk of it is restaurant or eateries. And I think that the foot traffic that those businesses can get from having apartments in our downtown would be phenomenal for them, especially to recover in this year where they didn't get to open for quite a few months, and then now they're limited on what they can do. I could just imagine the boon that they would get from being able to have those additional bodies in town to help with that. So more resources for them, which would be great for our town. Just to see them flourish would be great. I don't know that I could force people to do that, obviously, sitting on city council, but I would support that in that vein. Thanks for the thumbs up.
Great. Thanks so much for that question, Alexis. And thanks so much for that answer, Ms. Tillman. Yes, obviously we have to keep small businesses and how COVID-19 is affecting our economy at the top of our minds. So our next question is going to come from, I want to make sure, Dina. I'm asking.
Okay.
There we go.
Hi. Okay.
Hi.
Hello there. Hi. So my question is, as a member of City Council, you will be a single voice in a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
How will you make your opinions heard, especially those about social justice?
Okay. Thank you. So I will just let you all in on a little secret. My nickname is Holly. So if you happen to see my name on the ballot, if you're 18 or older, it says Leticia is my first name. And Holly is my nickname because when I was a baby, I used to holler a lot until my dad came home. So since I was an infant, I've been very vocal and don't have a problem speaking up. I never have. So I would continue to do that even on city council, not forcing it down anybody's throats, but I'm not afraid to speak up. And so given that it's nice to have a diversity of thought and ideas, I would be open to sharing those. And it doesn't mean that I would be the arbiter of what's happening with, I would just say with Black people. I could only be speaking for myself and what I've experienced or what my relatives have experienced within that community, and also what I'm seeing for around town with other groups. If I'm seeing that there's social justice issues, I'm going to speak up about them. And I think that the more that we can have conversations with each other, which is a lot of what my platform is about, is we just have to have respectful conversations. And I think that it could be that people aren't aware, and making people aware of what's happening is the first step. But in order to do that, you have to have a conversation. And I think you can do that without having all of the venom that we're seeing on Nextdoor or at city council meetings, et cetera. I think that we have to get to the point where we can have respectful dialogue, talk about what the issues are, share them, because at the end of the day, we're all humans. And I think that we all want to coexist together for the most part. And I think that that's how you have to do it. You just have to be open to hearing other people's ideas and making them aware. So as a lone voice, that's what I would do. And I would do it for any instance that I see social justice issues happening in our town. So thank you for the question.
She said thank you. Well,
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dina. And that was a really cute story.
Thanks.
About your nickname.
Oh, I didn't finish it. Let me finish it really quick. So I used to holler a lot, and my mom asked my older sister, what can we call this hollering little child? And she said, call her Holly. That was the most important part. So I've been Holly since I was an infant.
Thank you, that's great. Alrighty, moving on to our next question from Yoonji.
Okay.
Hello, and thank you for coming. And I know previously we talked a lot about social justice and racism, but another big part of social justice is climate justice.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the first steps that should be taken towards achieving climate justice in Clayton?
I would say, just to piggyback off of the last answer I gave, is just making people aware of what's occurring. And so because of where we live, we have access to clean water and electricity, et cetera. I think the next biggest issue for us would probably be ties in with affordable housing, right? And so if you have people who can't afford to move to our area and having an impact on their lives, having low-income housing or apartments that they can afford to move into to live in our city would be a great first step. And I'm not saying that we need to pack our city with a bunch of apartments. I'm just saying that being open to those ideas of having a project like that, and I think that there are 2 parcels in our downtown area that are already zoned for that. One has already been approved and there's another one. I think that's great. I look at it as to address the climate justice issue, allowing people who might not necessarily be able to afford a single family home. And so they might be living in a city where they don't feel comfortable, or they're harassed by the police, or any number of issues. They've got a horrible landlord and they've saved enough money to want to get out of that situation, but not enough to be able to afford a single family home, but they can afford maybe to have, a condo in our town. That's how we could probably address the climate justice issue, is realizing that it might not be something in our own town that we're affected by, but people who might want to move into our area could be affected by in their current communities. I think that's probably the first step that we should talk about as a town and be open to. Oh, thumbs up. Okay, thank you. I keep looking at the camera and I want to see your guys' faces so it looks like I'm not looking at everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eugene. Thank you so much, Ms. Tillman, for addressing climate change. I know it's an issue on all of our minds, and as everything is happening with the fires in California. So thank you so much for keeping that as one of your top priorities. Okay, moving on to Christina Strasnikov.
Christina, I don't see her.
Hi.
Oh, I see her. She's right under you. Hi.
Hi. So my question is, what is the very first, even minuscule thing that you would do if you were elected?
You said the minuscule, even the very first thing that I would do?
Yeah.
If I'm elected. So are we talking election night, or are we talking when I sit in the seat as a city council member?
Yeah, like in the city council.
In the city council, I would, that's a good one. Honestly, probably when I sit in the seat, I would say my slogan, which is "It's about time." And I'll share a little bit about what that means, because it's got a lot of play on words. It's about time that I'm actually sitting my butt in the seat, because my husband has been writing me in since 2014. He started a write-in campaign for the local Claytonites to write me in on election day. And he's been doing it every year or every election since then. Friends prior to that and since then have been saying, you really should run for city council. And I kept telling them to be quiet because I had no desire to run for city council. And it's also a play on words because it's about time that I feel healthy enough to do it. That's a lot of people don't know, but I had a kidney disease that I was diagnosed with in 2011 and just kept getting progressively worse into kidney failure. And I had a kidney transplant in June. And so it's about time that I actually feel healthy enough to run and take this on. So I would say the first thing that I would do is sit in that seat and probably not really yell at the top of my lungs, but say it's about time that I'm actually sitting there because it's a long time coming. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much for that answer. It's like when you picture yourself there and it's like, what am I gonna do when I'm there? Because you have all these big plans, right?
Yeah.
But what do you do when you're there? And it's like, you gotta visualize it. Alrighty, thanks so much, Christina, for that question. Our next question is going to come from Sydney Sterling.
Sydney. Hi, Sydney.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here, first of all. And my question for you as a city council member, how would you plan to better manage traffic in the city?
Oh, so traffic for me is a big one, especially since I have it as one of my key issues. And traffic is, well, you know that we're a thoroughfare coming from further east. So we have people who are coming out Marsh Creek Road that uses as a bypass essentially. I wouldn't necessarily be able to solve that issue, but we do have, the city council did pass earlier this year that they're going to implement extra signage, safety signs, so that the flashing lights, et cetera, that are coming from the Marsh Creek area as well as going towards the Antioch-Brentwood area, leaving Clayton as you get by the middle school. That's a huge issue. There's been a lot of accidents. In fact, I have a good friend who lives on a street that's right by there who complained a lot, starting at least 2 years ago, saying how dangerous that intersection is. She's almost been hit there and she witnesses several accidents or hears them. And so they're already taking care of that piece. I mentioned the other day during a city council meeting that sitting downtown dining at the restaurants, I can see people flying up and down the street. They can be young kids, people that are older than me, but they're right by the downtown Grove Park, and it's extremely dangerous, especially being right next to a park and you're in the middle of downtown. And I can assure you they're not going 20, 25 miles an hour. They're flying down the street. And I shared that I think that that's the next thing that we need to look at is trying to figure out a way to deter that because it's extremely dangerous. So I couldn't necessarily stop traffic from coming through, but I think any safety measures that we can put in place for our residents would be great. It would be nice if there were some other way for traffic to get by. And I mean, I know a lot of people commute, so it's a huge problem in the Bay Area in general. I'm not going to be able to solve that issue, but it would be nice if there was some way that we could either add additional lanes to freeways, which I know they're working on, just to alleviate some of the congestion so that when I'm leaving and trying to get to my office in downtown Walnut Creek, it doesn't take me 45 minutes to an hour to do that because I'm sitting on traffic in Ignacio Valley Road. So it's a huge issue. I can't solve it all, but I think anything that we can do in our downtown area would be great. And I just told them the other day I was not going to stop bringing it up, whether I made it on council or not. I do think that it needs to be addressed near the local park. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much for that answer. If anyone drives on Ignacio Valley Road, that's traffic is just a huge issue.
Oh, it's horrific.
Yeah, it's awful. Alrighty, thanks so much. And Sydney did her research on you. She read up on you and she read your priorities. So that was why she asked that question.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Alrighty, our next question is going to come from Sina Fahardi.
Hi.
Hi, Mrs. Tillman. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
My question for you is, what has been the biggest challenge in your professional career?
The biggest challenge in my professional career? There's a lot. You only to pick one. I would say the biggest one is, and it's going to kind of go hand in hand. There are about 1,300 people in my part of the firm, and out of that, we're about 1% So there's about 12 or 13 of us that are Black. I'm a client relations director, and there are only 2 of us who are Black who do that. So when we go to conferences, it's crystal clear if we don't show up. We have meetings all day long, but if one of us don't show up back to the room after the breakout session, it's obvious that we're not in the room. That's extremely hard. Whereas, our colleagues that are not people of color, they don't have that issue. They have the luxury of being able to say, I'm going to skip the 8 o'clock, check-in. I'm going to sleep in. We don't have that luxury. So that's one, and I'm just going to add a little bit more onto that, which is to say, when I won we have this sales and service award, and it's the highest award you can win in the firm. And each year, it's awarded to about 5 people from each division. And I won my first one in 2011 for 2010. And then I won my second one in 2015 for the year 2014. Excuse me. And with that year when I won it, the guy who had been my boss when I won it the first time in 2011 came up to me, and he thought he was joking, but he made a pretty vulgar comment, which was, "Who did you have to suck to get that?" And then he kind of giggled about it. And I just I just said, that's not funny. I didn't have to suck anybody. I actually earned this award. He was like, I'm just joking with you. I immediately reported him to HR because he didn't go up to go say that to the other people who were not people of color who won, but he chose to come say it to me. And I let him know it was unacceptable and I wasn't going to take it. So I would say being literally the minority, figuratively and literally, it's difficult being in a firm that size. So that's my answer.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I really wanted to hear the answer to that question as well, because as a woman of color myself, there are certain barriers that come along being in the professional world. So thank you so much for sharing that story.
And I will let you know that it won't stop. It's not going away. I've been in this profession 21 years now, and I won't say that those types of examples happen all the time, but being in the minority, you do stand out. And a lot more is going to be expected of you. You're going to have to work twice as hard to prove yourself. And you're not going to have the luxury of knowing that you're smart, you're articulate, etc. You're going to have to put in the extra work to prove yourself. Wish it wasn't that way, but it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Our next question is going to come from Zoe Dahl.
Zoe. Hi, Zoe.
Hi. So my question is, I'm someone who doesn't live in Clayton, but I've been going and visiting it for the past 13 years. Mm-hmm. And so my question is, what would be your ideal Clayton in the next 10 years or so?
My ideal Clayton for me, I don't want anybody to freak out and think that I'm going to try to get on city council and change everything, because I'm not. But if I could do things differently, I would love to see there be more diversity. And that means whether it's people who live in neighboring cities feeling comfortable come visit our town. I'm hearing story after story of people who are just driving through town who feel like they're being harassed and don't want to visit. I'm hearing, when I'm listening in on city council meetings right after the June 2nd and June 5th rallies, we had people who called in to say that they are in neighboring cities, and I assume that she was in Concord. Actually, I think she said she was in Concord. And she said she had come to our downtown restaurant. She didn't say which one, but she just didn't feel welcome there. I can't recall the reason why she said, but she says, I won't be back. And I just want you to know your town won't be getting my dollars because I don't feel welcome in your city. And so I really do want our town to be more, not only to look more diverse with residents living here that are more people of color, but also people on the outside looking in. I would like us to not have the perception of being a racist town, which is what I'm hearing constantly from people, whether or not they're emailing us. In fact, I got an email just before this meeting where a resident wants to speak to me because she said that she used to have a local business downtown, and she wants to tell me exactly what happened, but she ended up taking her business to other cities that were more welcoming, and she wants to tell me more about that story. And I think that that's a problem if we have people who don't want to bring their businesses to downtown, and that's what I would like to see flourish. We do have a lot of eateries. We have the space that's behind our bocce courts, if you guys are familiar with it, where there's a lot of vacant space that's there. And while we can't necessarily force that owner to have occupants, it would be nice to have a bustling city center, where residents can come down and patronize. People who come to visit our town really want to come do, one, have their businesses there, and two, encourage people to come to our downtown outside of just having our, art and wine, our Oktoberfest, our barbecues, etc. I think that having a bustling town with more businesses down there would be great. So that's my answer.
You're getting all the thumbs up. Thanks so much for giving very, very thoughtful answers to our questions. The next question is going to come from Maggie.
Hi. What do you think we, as members of the Clayton community, can do on an individual level to enable the change we wish to see?
Good question. I would say stay involved. You're a good example of that. Olivia's a great example of that. I think the younger voices carry a lot of weight, whether you guys know it or not. So I would encourage you all to keep it up. And I know a lot of people, it's not their forte to want to speak up and be active, but the more people that you can engage at a younger age, I think it would be great. I think when we're hearing it from adults, this goes back to Trey, it feels like it's more top down instead of bottom up. And I think that having that dialogue and hearing from youngsters, it could even be kids that are in elementary school sharing their experiences, that carries a lot of weight, whether you guys know it or not. That was really what got a lot of the adults listening at the June 5th rally. And so I think the more that we can encourage youngsters to speak up, the more change can be made, instead of it being, them thinking that it's just adults who want to shove things down their throat. I think that the more that they can hear from youngsters, letting youngsters know that they have a voice. You guys are doing a great job being in high school and recent graduates doing that very thing. Stay active, stay involved, keep speaking up. It's very powerful, and you guys carry more weight than you know.
Very, very wise words. Thank you so much. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to stay civically engaged.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Okay, so we have time for a couple more questions. The last question from a GENup member is going to come from Nisha, who is next. And I highly encourage any member of the public who wishes to ask a question to just use the raise hand function, or you can chat me as well if you have a question as we're starting to wrap up. So Misha, go ahead. Can you? Okay, good.
Hi, Ms. Tillman.
Hi.
Here. I was just wondering, what is your stance on defunding the police, and are there any sort of changes you would want to implement into the police department to make Clayton a safer community?
Okay, so my stance on defund the police. I hate that phrase because it confuses a lot of people. I think a lot of people don't realize that what it means is reallocating resources so that police don't have to be every single thing, meaning social worker, police officer, etc. And I think it scares off people, and they think that you want to actually shut down their police department. That is not true. I am a huge fan of the police. I was raised to respect them. I have lots of friends who are police officers. I know that every cop is not bad. I know that there is an issue with being able to be, silent when they don't speak up. And I'm not talking about my friends. I just mean in general that the police department, not like staying silent when they see things going wrong. And I think that they need to be held accountable. So if they are actually committing murder, then they should go to prison just like everybody would if they were a regular Joe on the street. So reallocating resources to have social workers, stepping in if they need to, I think is great. I think that there needs to be more training for police officers. And I know that we're continuing the conversations with our community, our local community police officers. We had our first meeting with them. We've been hearing from them since the June 2nd and June 5th rally on what happened in downtown Clayton. And I think the more that we can have those conversations, the better off we'll be. I do know that the city council, there are 2 city council members who currently sit on this public safety committee. And I was pleased to see that put into place because that allows the chief of police is on it, as well as the 2 city council members, and it's open to the public. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that, but if you call into that meeting, you can speak up, say what your issues are, and the chief will address them, which is nice because that's different than a city council meeting where you have 3 minutes to speak, say what the issue is, and then they don't say anything back. And so it's a nice way to start that dialogue. I am so pleased that that's put into place, and I think that they need to spread the word more about that so that residents know that they have that avenue to actually speak up and share their feelings. For example, as I was going through town, putting up signs throughout people's neighborhoods, we happened to stop by a friend of ours' house. He was out watering his lawn, and he shared that he feels that he's been harassed. He said 6 times in the 14 years that they've lived here. This is not a person of color who was telling me that. And he said, what do we do about that? Can they stop that? I feel like I'm being harassed, whether it's neighbors calling because my kids are too loud, which seems to be the majority of the complaints. He just said there's got to be something else that our officers can be doing. And I said, you need to call in and share that with the chief of police. There's this public safety committee meeting. I don't know what the frequency is, but I'll try to find out for you and share that. I think the more feedback that they can get from the local community, the better off our city will be. And this includes residents who have shared that they feel like they are being profiled. They're driving through town to come visit their significant other, and they get stopped almost every single time. And these are people who are either Latino or Black. They need to hear that. I'm glad that they're sharing it with me, but I shouldn't have to be the only voice carrying that forward for them, because then I think it kind of loses its luster if it's coming from the same voice. I think the more voices that they can hear from to realize, hey, this might be an issue you need to address, the better off that we'll be. So that was a long-winded answer to talk about defunding the police and where I stand, and how to make our community safer. Yes, I do think it's safe, but I think that residents don't feel safe or don't feel comfortable, especially if they're being pulled over, or if they're just sitting in front of their girlfriend's house and then, it's late at night and they're being, spotlight shown on them and the cops asking for their ID, etc. And the poor girl having to say, I literally live right there. This is where I live. Just because they were people of color, they feel harassed. And I think that people need to understand that that's actually happening in our town, and we need to talk about it. It's uncomfortable and people don't want to hear about it, but we need to talk about it more. Sorry, super long-winded.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's okay to give long-winded answers to questions that deserve conversation around them. This is something that we're gonna need to be talking about for a long time until there's finally.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it is 6:56. I want to give one more opportunity for anyone from the public to ask a question. You can use the raise hand function, or if you can't raise hand for whatever reason, you can chat me. Going once, going twice. Okay, alrighty then. I want to say thank you, Ms. Tillman, so much for joining us. And we have one final question, a traditional question that we ask at the end of every Zoom webinar. And that is, do you have any parting words, any parting advice for us, as youth in our community, just anything that you want to leave us with?
Oh gosh, yeah, I'm just going to reiterate what I just said. First of all, thank you guys for having me. This was a pure joy doing this. I'm honored to actually sit here and speak to all of you guys. I am impressed with your activism, and I would encourage you guys to keep it up. Spread your message far and wide. I will share it, and I have shared it since I found out about this webinar on my social media, but my husband's been doing a great job of it too, with me, is spreading the word to let people know that this actually exists, and letting people know that they should get involved. And I think it's great. In fact, don't be surprised. And if you hear from my daughters, letting you know that they want to get involved from this as well. I think that the younger people that they can actually know that they have a voice, the better off our world will be, because you guys truly are our future. I will say, admittedly, that the adults before you really screwed this up, and I hate that it's going to be on your shoulders to help fix it. But just know that you have people in your corner that are my age group that are willing to champion you guys on. We're here for you, but it is going to have to get solved during your lifetime. Keep it up. Encourage more people to do it with you guys, and stay involved, stay active. And I think that the more that we can get you guys involved with government, the better off our country will be. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Once again, I just thank you guys all so much, all the participants, for your patience. And once again, I'm so sorry for what happened at the beginning. But just thank you all so much for showing up, for being here, for asking your thoughtful questions, and Ms. Tillman for giving really amazing answers. And I just want to say that it means so much to me, and it means so much to so many people here, to have a woman of color running in, you know, a prominent local government position. It means so much. So I really can't thank you enough for setting that precedent for a whole lot of us. Okay.
Thank you.
And with that, it's 6:59, so 1 minute early, but go enjoy your evening, go enjoy your night, spend some time with your families. Am I frozen?
No, not to me.
Okay, good. Everyone's a little frozen, but you can go ahead and log off now. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Good night, everyone. Thank you all.